This is the AI chess coach from Empire Global Chess Academy. Today we're looking at the most famous game ever played, the Immortal game, Adolf Anderssen against Lionel Kieseritzky, played casually during a break in the London tournament of 1851. It lasts 23 moves, and by the end white has given away a bishop, both rooks, and the queen, and still delivers checkmate with the 3 pieces left over. A modern engine does not approve of everything that happens here, and we'll be honest about that as we go, but this is still the purest attacking game in chess history. Let's dive in. White opens with the king's pawn, claiming the center and opening lines for both the bishop and the queen. Black answers symmetrically, staking an equal claim in the center. The king's gambit. White offers a pawn to blast open the f-file and take over the center. Romantic and dangerous, though the engine thinks it's a slight overreach and would just develop with the knight. Black accepts the gambit, which is the critical test. That pawn on f4 is what the whole game will be fought over. The bishop's gambit. Instead of defending, white develops the bishop straight at the f7 square and deliberately invites a check. And there it is. Black's queen checks from h4, forcing the king to move and taking away white's right to castle for the rest of the game. White steps aside without complaint. The king looks awkward on f1, but white is counting on the rook coming to g1 later, and on every single move going into the attack. The Brian counter gambit. Black offers a pawn back to deflect the bishop away from f7, but this is where black starts drifting. The engine simply wants a piece developed with knight to f6. White takes the pawn. Material is level again, and black's queen is stranded out on h4 with nothing supporting her. Black finally develops a piece, eyeing the h5 and g4 squares to support that advanced queen. White develops with tempo, attacking the black queen and bringing the last kingside piece toward the action. The queen retreats, and now the whole game is about that queen. She's active, but she has no safe home, and white is going to spend the next 10 moves chasing her around the board. White shores up the center and frees the dark squared bishop. The engine slightly prefers the more ambitious d4, grabbing the whole center in one go. Black's knight jumps to h5, defending the extra pawn on f4 and eyeing g3. It looks aggressive, but the knight is stuck on the rim. The solid c6 was better. White's knight heads for the f5 outpost. The engine calls this an overreach and wants the rook to g1 first, but Anderssen is playing for the attack, not for the evaluation. Black's queen swings to g5, hitting the knight on h4 and holding onto the extra pawn. White ignores the attack and plants the knight on f5, a magnificent outpost right next to black's king, hitting g7 and e7. Black chips at the bishop on b5, but this is another pawn move at a moment when black desperately needs pieces out. The engine prefers g6, kicking the knight away and giving the king some air. White throws a pawn forward to trap the knight on h5. Wildly committal, and objectively a mistake, the engine wants to quietly retreat the bishop to a4, but Anderssen is burning bridges on purpose. The knight scurries back home. That's 3 moves with the same knight, and black still has exactly 1 piece developed. And here white simply leaves the bishop hanging on b5, because bringing the rook to g1 and opening the g-file matters more than a piece. This is the sacrifice the whole game is built on. Black takes the bishop, and this is the critical mistake of the game. The evaluation swings by more than 2 full pawns. Grabbing material while the queen wanders and not a single minor piece guards the king is exactly what white was hoping for. Challenging the pawn wedge with h5 was the way to stay alive. White gains time by attacking the queen again. Notice that every move of this attack comes with a threat attached. The queen steps to g6, the only square that keeps her safe. White kicks the queen one more time, gaining another tempo and prying open the h-file for free. Back to g5. The engine notes that grabbing the pawn with knight takes h5 was more testing, but black is understandably nervous about opening even more lines. The queen joins the attack with a nasty threat. Bishop takes f4 would hit the black queen, and she has nowhere to go because her own knight is sitting on f6. So black has to undevelop the knight all the way back to its starting square, purely to clear an escape hatch on f6. After 14 moves, black has nothing on the board but a queen who's been chased from one side to the other. White wins the pawn back and develops the last bishop with tempo, hitting the queen yet again. The queen slides to the escape square she just cleared. White brings the final piece into the game. Every single white piece is now developed and pointed at black's king, while black has developed nothing but that queen. Black finally develops a bishop and hits the rook on g1, but the engine calls it a mistake. Queen to c6, offering a queen trade to untangle, was the practical defense. The knight leaps into d5, attacking the queen and eyeing c7 next to black's king. The engine actually prefers the calm d4, but Anderson wants pieces landing on black's doorstep, not pawns. Black's queen grabs the b2 pawn and takes aim at the rook in the corner. Greedy, but the engine agrees it's the best try, because counting material is all black has left. One of the most famous moves ever played. White ignores both hanging rooks and plants the bishop on d6, offering the rook on a1 and the rook on g1 at once, purely to stop black from ever castling. Stockfish calls it a blunder, and by modern standards it is, but this is the move that made the game immortal. Black takes the rook on g1, and this is the move that actually loses. Steinitz pointed this out over a century ago and the engine agrees, taking the other rook first, queen takes a 1 with check, was far stronger. That one check would have changed everything. The quiet killer. The pawn to e5 blocks the long diagonal and cuts black's queen off from ever defending g7. Everything that follows depends on this one little pawn move. Black takes the second rook with check. On material black is now enormously ahead, a queen, 2 rooks and a bishop against 3 minor pieces, but every black piece except the queen is still sitting where it started. White simply walks the king to e2. Look carefully, black has no follow-up check at all, and that emptiness is the entire point of the position. Black brings the knight out to cover c7, and this loses on the spot. Bishop to a6 was the only defense, giving a piece back to break up white's coordination. Now white has a forced mate. The knight crashes in with check, and remember, the queen can't rush back to defend because white's own pawn on e5 is blocking the diagonal. The king is forced to d8. It's the only legal square on the board. The immortal move. White sacrifices the queen outright, purely to drag black's knight onto f6 and away from the e7 square. Black has no choice but to capture, and in doing so the last defender of e7 is pulled off the board. And mate. The bishop steps to e7, defended by the knight on d5. The king can't take it, c7 is covered by that same knight, e8 is covered by the knight on g7 and d7 and c8 are blocked by black's own pawn and bishop. 3 white pieces, a complete forced checkmate, against an opponent holding a queen, 2 rooks and a bishop more. White mates on move 23 with the bishop stepping quietly to e7. Count the material at the end, black has a queen, 2 rooks and a bishop more than white, and is completely helpless, because almost every one of those pieces is still sitting on its starting square. Look back at the sequence, the bishop on d6 offering both rooks, the pawn to e5 cutting the queen off from g7, the knight crashing in with check, and then queen to f6, sacrificing the queen purely to drag the last defender away from e7. This is what chess players call a pure mate. Every white piece left on the board takes part and every escape square is covered exactly once. The lesson isn't to start sacrificing rooks. It's the same lesson underneath, development and initiative are worth more than material, and every pawn black stopped to grab was a move not spent getting a piece out. If you enjoyed this breakdown, subscribe for more classic game analysis, and let me know in the comments which historical game you'd like to see covered next.